Councilwoman for this area, and thank you. I'm sure that you're here because you've been following the process and what is at stake, or what is being proposed from the rest of the council, or the majority of the council, I should say. Redistricting is required by law. It's a necessity by law, but tonight we're not going to focus on anything except what's being proposed for the 7th and 8th district. There are 4 council districts that must make changes. That impacts, the 7th is involved in that as well because we have to move south. But in this local debate, I wrote some notes. In this local debate, there are both opinions and facts. I'm going to tell you some of the opinions and some of the facts as I see them. Opinion number 1, dividing the Atlantic Commercial Corridor could have a negative impact on future progress if under 2 council members. And I have to say, policy is hard enough. Now add the creative visioning differences, and I think we may not be where we are today after all the hard work of the community, the businesses, the BIA, and our office. We're very successful at this point, and I hope that we continue in that direction. The fact, the business corridor from Bixby to San Antonio is what's called a CNP zone. That stands for Commercial Neighborhood Pedestrian Oriented Zone. We have 5 of these zones located throughout the city. We happen to have one of them. The zoning from Bixby Road south to Wardlow is called a CCA zone. That's Community Commercial Automobile Oriented. So the discussion about that the 7th district already has part of the business district is a little misleading because they serve 2 different populations through zoning. Bixby South is not an extension of the pedestrian business corridor, so we must remember that. You know, the conversation is out there that there are other areas in the city where the business districts are divided. I'll give you an example. Downtown, the DLBA covers all of the downtown area, and the 1st and 2nd district do share the organization, but they have a split. Suja from the 2nd district takes it from the Ocean up to 3rd Street, and I'm using Pine as the primary corridor. She takes it from the Ocean up to 3rd Street, and then Robert picks it up from 3rd Street to 8th Street, which is the business area. But they aren't dividing it down the middle of the corridor where then you have to have common agreement and vision shared by 2 different council offices, which I think is detrimental for any community. I'm sure we would never see that in the Belmont Shore area. I wouldn't want to see it in any of our shopping areas or our areas that we are focusing on for commercial. Opinion number 2, reuniting the neighborhoods with the Bixby title into the 7th district will be good for the community. This is the opinion of Mr. Johnson. Fact number 1, Bixby Terrace, which is Bixby Road to Carson and Orange to Cherry, was developed between 1941 and 1943. Bixby Highlands, which is Carson north to San Antonio and Orange to Cherry, was developed in 1942. Those are both areas of the community that have been put into the 7th district, the last redistricting period. In the 8th district, we have Bixby Knolls proper, which is Carson to Bixby Road, Orange to California. That was developed between 1947 and 1958. And then we have Carson to Bixby Road, California to Atlantic. Those homes were developed in 1938 to 1941. In New Bixby, which is Carson north to San Antonio, between Claiborne and Cartagena, those were developed between 1947 and 1954. So the idea or the comment that is coming out of the 7th to unite all of the Bixby neighborhoods is very misleading. These are all areas of the city that were developed at different times. And I would say, other than sharing the Bixby name, that's about all they have in common. Fact number 2, It will add, these changes that Mr. Johnson is proposing will add 3,984 residents to the 7th district when only 1,311 are required to stay within the 5±%. Opinion number 3. Keeping census tracts whole is a criteria point established by the council. This is another point that Mr. Johnson is making, that the reason that he wants to take so much, that it's to keep the census tracts whole. However, I did speak with an election attorney, and that is not a requirement. You know, they want you to keep census blocks together, but not necessarily census tracts. It's not a requirement by law. Mr. Johnson uses number 13 on the criteria guideline sheet that you have that states use census tract boundaries whenever possible. Fact, as I see it, this argument violates number 7 on that list that says avoid split in neighborhoods having a clear identity, which we do. Number 14, preservation of population cores, which have consistently been associated with particular districts, which we have. And number 15, avoidance of large-scale dislocations of district populations, which is what this would do. Number 17, redistricting should not focus on areas of non-population, such as business areas, this would impact our corridor. Opinion number 4, and this is my opinion. This process will increase the Johnson voting base by acquiring nearly 4,000 residents. This neighborhood is one of the highest voting areas in the city. The fact to that is, be careful what you wish for. I say that to Councilmember Johnson. You know, the Long Beach Hush constituents have long-term memories. They've been fighting for quality of life issues since Hush won in the early 1980s when the council member was Ed Tuttle. And I was part of the force that walked the neighborhoods at that time. You know, we don't forget. I've asked for Mayor Foster to assist in this dispute. I've asked James Johnson to understand the impact of what he is initiating and to find another compromise, and both have met on deaf ears. I said, let's make an attempt at other scenarios. I have not received any feedback from them. Both promised, well, actually, Mr. Foster has promised phone calls, which I have not received. So I'm being very vocal about how I feel about this. You know, I'm not going to be here in a year. You're going to have another leader, but they should be coming in with an organization and with neighborhoods that are intact and have a voice to speak for all of them. You know, we are a microcosm of this city, but the majority of the voters, the people that really take the 8th district in the direction that it needs to go in to support the other communities that may not vote, half of that is being threatened to be moved into the 7th district, which would have a negative impact on the entire 8th district. So that is my opinion. So what can you do? Well, I'm going to suggest that you go to savedistrict8.com and leave your comments, but even more importantly, go to longbeach.gov/redistricting. Leave your comments there. They will be shared with all the council members. You all received this card. If you didn't, pick one up at the door. Okay, on the back of this card, it has the email addresses of the mayor and all the council members and their phone numbers. They'd love to hear from you. And probably the most critical, and I can tell you this from, you know, the Hush days, is that your presence sends a message. Just like all of you here tonight, this is overwhelming. Your presence sends the message that you say no and hell no. You know, that you should be part of the deciding factor in what is happening in this process, and that you don't forget. I found this interesting as well. I was reading on LB Report this morning about the redistricting lines and how I believe for the congressional lines were redrawn again, and Councilmember DeLong was quoted as saying, "Unfortunate, appears to be based on input of special interest groups. If we wanted gerrymandered districts, we could have stayed with the previous method of having politicians draw the boundaries. Well, if you're saying that about Congress, why aren't you saying that about what you're trying to do right here? When I was proposing at the council meeting where we were defining what the map was going to look like, I was making my proposal, and the comments kept coming back from those that were opposed to it, the council members that were opposed to it, that they weren't going to further gerrymander the 7th district. And so we all have a general feeling of what the word gerrymander means, but I wasn't absolutely sure where it came from. Well, it actually was originated on March 26, 1812. And these are some of the things that came out of my investigating. Draw lines to maximize the clout of persons' supporters. Then there's something called cracking, and it says splitting a like-minded voting group's electoral strength by dividing its population into multiple districts. And then there was a quote, and the quote was, "As map makers, we can have more of an impact on an election than the voters." There's a documentary that's going across the country right now called Gerrymandering. And one of the lines from that is, "Nothing will produce bad history more directly nor brutally than drawing a line." When this is over, as a community, I believe that we should put on the ballot, the 2012 ballot, the attempt to take this out of the hands of the council. We think 10 years is a long way off, but it's not. And we'll take it out of the hands of the politicians and let it be in the hands of the citizens whose lives are impacted. So I know that there are a number of you that have limited time here tonight. I'm going to introduce Tom Modica, who is our Government Affairs Director, Leader, Guru, and he's going to walk us